I'm very honored to Ukraine and SME and land reform and SME and access to finance. This is a very important twin, land and finance. Capital and land is like brother and sister, and we will analyze it together with the key stakeholder this afternoon. I want to thank you very much that you join us, and this is now the 5th event of the Ukrainian European EU SME Week. We are very honored that we have a lot of topics already covered, and we really make progress when it comes to improvement of the SME climate in this country. This is also very important. I would like to open with the presentation now. And first of all, I would like to welcome Dmytro. He's from EasyBusiness, the co-organizers. I want to thank you for your initiative, and also you're the biggest fighter for the reform of the land market here in this country. Clearly, I think together we have the target to make European style of land management possible. When it comes to the end of the moratorium, I think it's no secret. We really want that as fast as possible, and I want to thank you for your effort here.
Thank you.
I would like to welcome also Olga from the Chamber of Notary. This is very important stakeholder when it comes to land and the SMEs and access to finance. Efficient service in European style notary is really something what the SMEs here need and also receive, and we can work together very successfully. Thanks for coming this morning. Also, I would like to thank very much the Ukrainian Club of Agricultural Companies. And Taras, I would like to thank you very much. You are representing big companies, but also they are very important friends of SMEs, and really when you to work together closely, a lot can be achieved, I think, with this huge potential which Ukraine has. It's really amazing, and we have to release these amazing qualities of Ukraine with your help. Taras, I would like to thank you very much. And of course, as Austrian, I'm always very honored to see an Austrian bank here. It's already a long-term friend from us. And Yevgeniy is from the Raiffeisen AVAL bank, the head of the SME department. This is very important to combine land and capital. And here the banking sector is the key intermediary. And I would like to thank you very much that you're here. And we are looking forward to close cooperation also in 2017. When it comes to the key stakeholders, I see that in Ukraine we have to really integrate the various expert levels still, and this is very good that we have the Chamber of Notary, and we have now the Association of Surveyors and Geodetic Engineers, and this is very important stakeholder when it comes to measurement, when it comes to exact size of the property, and your expertise is really very important for us. We want to thank you very much that you're here this afternoon with us. And I would like to welcome also one of the leading thinkers in that sector, who has also reformed a lot of the efforts already in the last years here. And I would like to say also, as an investment banker, you bring all these capacities in the agricultural and in the investment banking together. This is very special for us that you're here this afternoon. Thanks a lot for coming. And I would like to welcome Mr. Frolov, who is the president of the Association of Property Evaluators. And here you see the beauty, the experts from the business, from the SME sector. Here you see the notary, here you see the surveyors, and of course the property evaluators, because obviously it's very important to have a scientifically clear market value established with your competence, and we are very thankful that you are here with us in this roundtable. Now I would like to outline some key facts from our project, and this is basically. We have launched on the 14th of November. We have now 19, actually it's already 20 stakeholders, some very big ones like the Ukrainian defense industry, the European SME Association UAPME, the voice of SMEs in Europe, and also a lot of other stakeholders have joined this common effort to improve the situation. We had also the Ukrainian European Business Forum on the 24th of November with President Protsenko in Brussels during the big summit. This was very important because there UAPME asked the President of Ukraine about his commitment to SMEs, and President Poroshenko has very clearly outlined that it's a crucial role, the SMEs here in Ukraine, and he has fully committed his support to improve the business environment for SMEs in Ukraine. This is also very necessary because the reality of business in Ukraine today under European perspective is very dramatically bad. We have to be honest here, and we have to assess very clearly the situation. In all factor inputs, the situation is not good enough. And we really have to go into all this specific land, capital, human resources, how it's regulated and how it's taxed, and we have to improve it systematically. There's an assumption that Ukraine is too big, somehow different, or somehow a special place. Of course, every country is special, but there's nothing special in terms of a country and its management of its resources. Yeah? It's just very badly managed at the moment, yeah? And we have to significantly improve it. And here are some key things which we say. The main assumption is that in the Balkans, the European Union and the international partners in the last 10 years have systematically improved the business environment tremendously, and the same process has to start here in Ukraine. Labor market, this will be the topic in January, yeah, but it has to be much more flexible and has to be also reformed. SME and mobility infrastructure needs to be really significantly improved in order to support transport of goods and services. SME and capital will be one of the topics here today. When it comes to tax reform, obviously we have discussed already, accounting reform, informality, these are major challenges. And SME and land access, which is of course the main topic of this morning. We have this moratorium in place. It's a very rough measure for a public policy aim which wants to be achieved. We are in favor to have European standards of land management, and we will go into the details as well, what is done, has to be done in construction law, what has to be done in the cadastre, what has to be done in the mortgage situation. The basic assumption of this system is that land and capital is a partnership. Yeah? Land and capital, capital is land, land is capital. This is very important to understand. It's no antagonistic situation, but the banking sector and the land management sector have to work together in order to facilitate SME access to finance. I just want to highlight one important figure as well. It's not just the ownership of land, but also a land to do something. Like, for example, Taras will talk about agriculture, but also to build something is very important. And it makes a big difference how you regulate it. In the Balkans, we have achieved, for example, in the doing business ranking, in just 1 year in Serbia, from 152 to 36 in the world. It's possible with good policy. This is the basic assumption of this morning. We have to bring all the stakeholders on the table, the state, the municipalities, the property sector service providers like the notaries, the surveyors, the property evaluators, but also the financial sector. This is very important to work together to improve the situation. This is my call. Let's make it happen. Let's work together and let's improve the situation along European lines. This is the stakeholders already part of it. And this is basically a summary of what SME policy in general is. And now I would like to say that this is the vision mainly. You know, we want to be very successful. Ukraine has all the potential to be really a big asset, actually, a contribution to the European Union, and also a very successful and rich place. It just needs a little bit of better public policy. This is what we want to achieve together in 2017. I want to thank you now for the beginning, for the start, and I would like to thank Dmytro now for his outline on land management, and also for his leadership for this table, and also for his contribution already in this important public policy debate. Dmytro, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Günther, for a presentation, for a brief introduction to our topic today. And probably I'll continue in Ukrainian. Can you give me, please, the clip?
Once we are talking about the land reform and about the development of SMEs, it is important to understand few important things. What could be the strategy of development of SMEs? It should be based on 4 main levels: public policy, sectoral policy, cooperation with business associations, and the development of the culture of conducting business. Today you had the chance to listen to a very brief introductory remarks of Günther, who is a very good partner of ours, who loves Ukraine, believes in Ukraine, is trying to change the situation in Ukraine. And we have the chance to talk here with experts who represent business associations, who represent different NGOs who are fighting for creating the free land market in Ukraine. Once we are talking about the reform of the state policy, public policy, the development of agricultural sector and moratorium is one of the most important for us. That is what will allow us to make a huge step ahead in the development of economy, a huge step ahead towards European future, to creating different opportunities for development of business, population, and the country. Once we are talking about agricultural sector, it's one of the most important in the economy of Ukraine. It's the sector which has been growing at the rate of 7-8% for the last 20 years. It generates about 15% of GDP of Ukraine. It more than but again, despite all these huge land resources, despite all the potential of the agricultural sector, we have moratorium, which delays the development of agricultural sector and does not allow the population to defend their constitutional rights. Talking about moratorium, it's a direct limitation on the constitutional rights of 7 million Ukrainians who received about 28 million hectares of land in more than 15 years. They cannot dispose of that resource. How does it work in civilized countries? And I would like to introduce our joint research survey, EasyBusiness, which is based on two main things. First, it's international experience, the analysis of how the land market was developing in most countries of the world, and the conclusions from that, whether the market should be open or not, and the survey of economic effect, which could be achieved in 10 years or within the next 10 years after the market is open. At the first stages of our survey, people were asking questions why we were selecting these countries but not others, and we decided to develop the methodology of selection of the countries, which includes two main stages. And after that, out of 193 countries, we selected 60, which were analyzed according to parameters of land market, preconditions of reforms, the fact how the market functions now, the main limitations and results of functioning of the market. But the countries were divided into four main groups. If the country, the population doesn't have a chance to sell or buy land, this country falls under the closed type of the market. If the population can buy and sell land, but the foreigners do not have access, then this country is classified as closed for foreigners market. If the foreigners can buy and sell land, but there are some restrictions, the country is classified as open with the restrictions market, and if there is an open market, it is an open market. Why we did it? We did it to demonstrate the difference, the correlation between how the market of land is developing, how the sector of agricultural production is developing, how the economy of the country is developing, the type of the openness of the market. Here you see the difference, the comparison of prices for land in three types of markets. The average price for land, for 1 hectare of land, of agricultural land, in countries of open market type is much higher. We are not talking about closed market, that is why there's no market price for it. Talking about lease, the lease is approximately $30-40, but in some cases it could be bigger. The 30-70 is an average in Ukraine. If we compare that with the countries of Europe or with the countries with open type of the market, the price is about $200-300. Agricultural business is losing there, and if we want to talk about what type of market Ukraine needs, we are talking about open market type, and you see the correlation between the type of the market with GDP per capita, GDP, value added created in agricultural center, and the type of openness of the market. You see that the most open type of market countries are mostly successful in agriculture and in economic development. But why was it done? In order to model 4 main scenarios for Ukraine, what we will get in the next 10, 20 years. If the market is open or closed, or how open it will be, to what extent it will be open. If we are talking about closed market, we preserve the status quo, and that could lead to the effect of $10 billion. And this will be when population gets money for the for lease of their land, the population will pay taxes for owning land, and this will generate $10 billion. If we are talking about closed for foreigners market, the general effect would be $40 billion, because business will get access to investments into agricultural sector. They will be able to sell and buy land. The revenues of the population will grow, and they will generate more consumers' expenditures. The investments will grow, and the total effect of the scenario closed for foreigners market will be $40 billion in the next 10 years. Why not more? Because foreigners will not have the right to buy land, and this will constrain the demand for that resource. If we are talking about open with the restrictions market, it will generate 60 billion, and if we are talking about open market, this could generate up to $100 billion for Ukraine.
Тому земельна реформа є важливою для України. Перш за все, це економічний ефект, який буде складати до $100 мільярдів наступні 10 років після реформи. З іншої сторони, це міжнародний досвід, який ми дослідили, та це приєднання до європейської цивілізованої спільноти.
We're talking about the joining the European international community, which respects the rights of the population to their resources, the ownership rights. That's why this is very important in order to observe those rights. We are talking about the benefits for the population. There are 3 of those: the freedom of choice, new opportunities, and consolidation of the effort to achieve a certain result. So after this reform, the population will be entitled to sell the land, exchange the land, and can take the loan under the collateral of the land. And this is very important, and I hope that today we can discuss this issue, like the loan against the collateral, because this issue is very important in the agrarian sector, and we are going to focus our attention more on this specific issue. But actually, finishing my speech, there are 3 major factors which can stimulate the development. Well, generally speaking, we still stimulate the establishment of the open market in Ukraine. A legal aspect, actually the rights of the population to their ownership, to their property, regarding the management, the disposal, etc. Number 2, international experience, analysis study of more than 60 countries of the world. The more open is the market, the better the conditions for the agrarian produce. And number 3, economic effect, because of the creation of the open market in Ukraine, which can amount to $100 billion regarding the consumer benefits, etc.
For your clear vision which you share with us. And also I would like to say that I have written an open letter to the President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, and he has also kindly enough responded that they are very much aware of that issue. But what is the common concern is, of course, property rights. Yeah? And definitely our aim is to make sure European-style property rights are protected. This is for the landowners who now cannot sell, really a big infringement, and we want to remedy this. And together, I think it's very important important that also we strengthen with the Chamber of Notary this property rights in Ukraine, because there is a fear, because it's a very important asset of the people, but we want to make sure that every property right is really handled according to European standards. And thank you, Dmytro, for your effort. And I would like now to welcome the Chamber of Notary, because you are already bringing and working on European standards in this country, and we have to communicate this together, that property rights are safe with your support. And notaries are really a very precious profession for us, and we are grateful that you are here with us at this panel. Thanks a lot. Please, Olga, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oleg. I'm Vice President of the Notary Chamber, and I'm authorized today by this Chamber to tell you about how the reform in the delegation of the powers by the notary in the sphere of the state registration for the real estate and business. A bit of history. All of us remember that until 2013, the public registration of the rights to the property was taken by the Technical Registration Bureau. As for the land, plots of land, it was the self-governance bodies, local self-governance bodies, and it was done just exclusively by, based on the address of the owners of this property, which was not convenient because all of them had to cover a lot of big distances in order to have the opportunity to register their right. Also, there were some big legal risks because there was a certain period of time between actually registration of the right and when this right becomes validated, because we know that the right comes into force since the date of this registration due. Actually, according to the on January the 1st, 2013, Ukraine carried out the reform on the let's say partial delegation of powers to the notary chamber. I'm talking about the notary operations, and of course that has a very positive effect and impact for the citizens and the businesses, because the period of time which created the majority of the legal risks was removed that period of time, and there is the so-called single cycle and one window regime, since the population and the businesses approach the notary for the certificate. And before doing that, the notary has to verify the person of the parties, whether there are some of the cumbersome issues, and also the ownership of the property, and a lot of other much required actions which have to protect the parties against the negative legal consequences. Then the registration of the application for the property is done immediately after that, so there is no time period between different actions, which enables our citizens and the businesses not only to have comfortable conditions and the affordability and accessibility of this service, but also they do not have any kind of legal risks or the period of time which can lead to some negative consequences regarding the property, which is the subject of this kind of the situation. Now, the notary recommend themselves to be high professional, and they showed the high quality of their work. They eradicated the corruption component of the state registration. As a result of the notary efforts, the government passed the decision to delegate the powers to the notary, not only as a result of notary actions, but also to the new formed facilities of the real estate and the registration of the rights of the business. This reform has been in place for the 12th month now. We had some difficulties because any kind of large-scale reform of this caliber may encounter some, let's say, unforeseen situations. They were talking about the simplification of dealing with the documents to be provided to the notary for the state registration. Actually, the government goal was a good one. They tried to decrease the number of the requirements for the documents, to make easier for the government and business to prepare the package of documents for the registration, but the government could not foresee that there would be a certain category of persons, fraudulent persons, frauds actually, who dealt with this business in the legal means, taking care of the legal means. That's why they were from rather Ukraine. On November the 2nd, they introduced the anti-raider reform, so they adopted a number of the amendments to be introduced into the legislation. And again, if you're talking about notary certification of documents submitted to the state registrar and the notary, which again will protect the businesses and the citizens from their property be captured or stolen in the future. Speaking about the problems which partially exist today and which we hope in the nearest future to resolve, we are talking about the work of the public registrars with who the notary works, because the software of the public registration of the natural persons and the legal entities hasn't been changed for many years now and doesn't meet the requirements of the effective legislation, but we hope that we are going to take care of that in the near future. Again, sometimes we have the days when we do not have a chance to have an access to the register because there is some kind of the DOS attacks, and we do hope that in the nearest future we'll be able, owing to the resolution of technical problems, we'll be able to provide high quality services to the local population, the businesses, which again will be affordable and accessible. As regards the agrarian reform, the notaries today are the users of the public land cadastre. Unfortunately, not all of us, because we have about 6.5 public and private notaries, and not of them are connected to this public land cadastre, which is provided on a payable terms, and this is a very topical issue, and they promised to us that they will provide the free access to all the notaries to the public land cadastre, which will enable us during the implementation of the agrarian reform and the lift of the moratorium for the for land use, will give us the chance to use the land without any kind of limits or hindrances.
Security. Nobody wants to get any risk with his own property. It's the most important asset you have, and we are grateful that we have a Chamber of Notary in Ukraine which is already working on very good standard. And as you remember, in the European Chamber of Notary, all the standards will be additionally improved, and you will fill all this European regulation, and together we can somehow ensure the population that the property in Ukraine is safe. Thanks a lot. It's very important, not just in this sector, but in all sectors. For SMEs, you are an important partner, and we are looking forward to close cooperation in the future. I would like now to give the floor to Taras from the Club of Agricultural Companies. This is a very important sector, obviously, for Ukraine, and we are very, very honored that you are here. You have a very specific clientele of big companies, and we would like also that you reach out to the SMEs like a mothership to the whole fleet, yeah? And you really nurture the relation with SMEs in the future, and I'm grateful for your leadership. I'm happy that you're here this afternoon, and I would like to give you the floor now, and for your perspective on the land market. Please, Taras, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Günther.
In fact, I believe it's not just for big agricultural companies, but for the whole agro sector. Land reform is a key reform. From the point of view of land reform and cooperation of all agricultural companies, there is a big potential in synergy. Looking at the latest trends, we see that agricultural sector has stopped in development. We see same indicators, industrial indicators, If we look at that in hryvnia equivalent, it looks like they're growing. If we look at it in dollar equivalent, they are not developing at all. And that is because the sector is waiting for agricultural reform. The calculation showed to increase the attractiveness of the sector, we need to conduct business more intensively, and we need to invest more. But the risks to invest more are not compared to the risk, and no business will go to more intensive technologies without understanding that the risk will be covered. Without the land reform, there will be no growth of investments and no growth of the sector. If the weather conditions are favorable, we will be at the same level. If the weather is not favorable, there will be a big decrease. If the leader of economy falls down by 30% because of bad weather conditions, this will be bad. Like we see in France and Germany, the results are bad despite all the technologies, because the weather is the weather. And not to wait for good weather, we would like the rules for the land market to be passed this year. Even understanding the rules of game will be the signal that people can invest this year. We need to adopt rules as fast as possible, and this will produce a big effect. If a big agribusiness invests, then we understand that own potential is not sufficient to control all the processes, and this will become an impetus for the development of SMEs that will be providing these services. Now there is an understanding of the big agrarian business that they need to outsource some of the services. And this will be a new niche of opportunities for SMEs in this sector. I can talk a lot, but what I want to say is that if we implement just half of the reform, this will not help us. If we understand that agricultural sector should give plus to the budget, for that we need to implement this reform. If agricultural sector is our hobby, that is what makes us happy, then we can preserve it. But I believe that in conditions of the economy of Ukraine, it is the hobby which is too expensive, and that is why it should be turned into full-fledged business. And the primary effect from investment and from intensification is difficult to calculate, but I believe there will be a very big effect because every job will be creating 3 auxiliary jobs. Because agricultural sector is a primary value-added creation, and after that some other services are accumulated. We understand one thing, that we need to use every opportunity and talk about that with all the stakeholders, with the society. Unfortunately, there are no other options. We need to implement such rules of game as soon as possible. And I know there are small and medium-sized producers who want to go to agricultural sector. there are many niches, berries, orchards and others, and I'm sure that Raiffeisen Bank AVAL would finance that, but the land is not centralized. There is the business idea, but physically it is impossible to start investing, and this is a big problem. The potential is several $billion, and I would say even more. And we need to talk about that all the time, like we are doing it now, so that the society changes. If the society understands, then there will be no choice to continue moratorium. Thank you.
Commitment towards the agricultural sector, and I would like to outline, it's not so flexible. If you are really ready to invest considerable amounts in agriculture, you are connected to the country, you're committed, and it should be, and every state has to the obligation to really analyze clearly the obstacles and issues which are hindering more investment, and then to remove them and to really support agriculture and investment. And we will do that together with Alexander Shurla. I would like to welcome him as well from the Prime Minister's office, from the Sagur Group, who is our friend and partner here to do the regulatory reform in the Prime Minister office. And together, I think we can build a very strong alliance to really improve the situation. I would like to thank you now, Taras, for this, and also thank you for your commitment to SMEs. That's very important, and we're looking forward. Agriculture will be one of the key sectors we will be working in 2017 together with tourism. Tatiana from the Tourism Federation, also very much welcome. But of course, in order to make everything possible for SMEs, it's important to have a strong partner in the financial sector. This is very important. With Raiffeisen AVAL, there is a strong Austrian bank here working on Austrian standards, European standards here already. And please, it would be very good, Yevgeniy, if you can outline what are your day-to-day considerations, obstacles you have maybe with collateral, with other issues, and your perspective on the mortgage and the SME access to finance and the land market. We are honored that you are here. Thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Could you demonstrate the slides? This year we have seen quite an interesting situation. Our clients have accumulated big sums on deposit accounts, on current accounts, and they addressed us for funding. And the reason of that behavior is that when it was not clear whether the moratorium will continue or not for 2017, they were accumulating money for possible purchase of land. That confirmed the fact that презентацию Raiffeisenbanku. There is an interest from small business. There is an interest to invest into land. Maybe not in big amounts, but there is such an interest and such readiness. As to whether there is financing in the market, you will see the figures. There is the financing. There is enough liquidity in the market. There is a desire of the banks to exercise their main function to provide credits to support the real sector. This year, the volumes of crediting, at the example of Raiffeisen Bank AVAL, grew up by 40% compared to 2013. Why we compare these years? Because 2013 was the last quiet year when economic processes were quite active in the country. We understand that the growth could be even bigger if we take into account the inflation level and the military conflict. Then the potential, we understand that the potential is great. But if you look at the structure of this crediting, again, believe me, you would see, if the presentation were to be demonstrated, you would see that 30-35% of new credits are issued for investment. Most of new crediting is issued for short term, and very often in the form of credits without collateral. Why so? You've heard the answer already. The issue is in security. The land is the most clear security, but we cannot take it as collateral. And we see some operational problems at the level of our clients, at the level of decision making, when the client that has a good positive credit history has to re-execute many agreements, and that's quite a lengthy process. And talking about credits to agro clients, the banks are not very fast. It was interesting to hear the question from the representatives of agricultural ministry, why banks do not provide credits to orchard growing, because orchard growing requires long terms and it is desirable to have ownership for land. We believe that the land reform will take place in Ukraine and will be able to more efficiently invest into the development of our country, and we will help increase of GDP that was shown about $100 billion for the next 10 years. And Raiffeisen Bank AVAL is ready for that.
Translation of land ownership into access to finance, this is what the banking sector has always done, should do, and we need to provide the right public policy in order to make that effectively. We call it like this in our theory: when you have high interest rates, it's like fever in a kind of national economy, and you know you have still high interest rates here, despite they are reduced these days, but a safer cadastre, a clarity in property rights, and the European land management allows the banking sector to significantly reduce risk and also reduce interest rates. This is very important mechanism, and we are grateful for your leadership and for your support, Yevgeniy. I would like now to welcome the Vice President of the Association of Geodesy, and also to see the exact measurement is important in the property rights, in the security of the cadastre data, and we would like to welcome you very much, and also your presentation from the side of the surveyors and the geodetic expert. Please, Professor De Vore. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Hunter.
As Günther mentioned, I represent here the, let's say, the Public Association of Ukrainian Society of Geodesy and the mapping cartography. I would like to explain how we work and how it promotes the development of SME. Our organization was founded back in 1991. It unites more than 50 different organizations, leading organizations in Ukraine, small and medium. Some of them are still public or state-owned. Our organization is part of the World Federation, the so-called FIH. Association actively cooperates with all the unions, associations in Europe and the world over. Based on the results of our activities, of our work, we actually reflect all our attainments, achievements, in the achievements of our partners, our enterprises, which are part of our association. And actually, we cover the news about them at our mass media outlets. We publish different books, magazines, and including modern internet network or whatever else, or whatever other media you can imagine. A very important direction of our activities of our public association are the increasing the prestige of and the interests of the representatives of this sector, support and protection of the interests and the interests of the workers, organizations, employees, organizations of the research, scientific engineering, construction, cadastre, land management, and other organizations with who we work in this or another way in line of our business. One of the major directions of our activities is the increase of membership, of the expansion of the membership of our enterprises, which become part of our association. Such organizations, which are well known the world over as the Swiss companies like Geodesy, the Japanese company Topcon, the United States company Trimble, all those companies which are involved in all the spheres of the economy of Ukraine, they are members of our association. That's why their efforts and our cooperation with them, we believe, actually promotes the development of SME and also the increase of the jobs, of new jobs, for those who work along in those sectors or sections. Also, I would like to mention here that our society, Ukrainian Society of Geodesy and Cartography, constantly rivets attention to the research work. Maybe this deviates from the topic of our roundtable, but represents our society. Participate in such functions as the expedition to the Antarctic area, where we use the modern technologies, 3D scanning, and the UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Over 21 years of our existence, of our work, we have organized our own, we held our own conferences on a regular basis, also participate in one of the global brand let's say functions, annual meeting, which is called Intergal. It takes place, or it's held in Germany. Intergal actually represents all the world leaders working in the directions of development of our activities. I'm talking about Geodesy, Cartography, land management, cadastres, and the related topics or issues. This enables us in the future to use the most modern technologies at the highest possible level, which could be introduced and used in Ukraine. I can say that those technologies at present almost do not differ, just slightly differ from the foreign technologies, and the employees of our society use the most modern technologies which can be implemented or used in this country, in Ukraine.
Much. It's very important that we work closely together with the geodets and the surveyors, because the exact measurement of the property, together with the exact property rights, creates the security, which then also allows for market liberalization of land. I would like to announce that we will do a very close partnership, and I'm also say that it's great that also the stakeholders are already in the European umbrella organizations, because the European Union very active on making geoportals and supporting geoportals, complete transparency of every single ownership of every single property in a country. This is what we have achieved in many countries like Macedonia, for example, and it creates a lot of legal certainty and clarity on ownership. It helps in anti-corruption, and it is really a wonderful thing for any society. Thanks a lot, Professor. I would like now to welcome Oleksii, who is an investment banker and has also a background as advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, if I'm correct? To two of them. Very good. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of things have been already discussed, and there's a lot of political context. And we want, with our initiative now, with the stakeholders together, support this public policy effort and really make sure that Ukraine is a leader in transparency, accuracy, property rights, modern land management as a basis for investment decisions. And we hope that Ukraine will attract a lot of them in the future. And please share your perspective with us.
Добрый день, коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Just to start with, I understand that maybe I should not persuade anybody that the reform is badly needed because we are in the same boat, and everybody understands that. I'll start with the political statement of this story, The reform, for many years now, actually comes against the resistance of the populist parties which defend their own interests, who say that the land belongs to the people of Ukraine. We can't do anything about that. And this is the basis for the extension of the term of moratorium, for example, is their argument. We have to understand clearly that the land has ceased to be the property of the people of Ukraine in the 1990s when they issued the certificates not to 51.5 million, not 28 million, but only 7 million people who got the right to huge plots of land. Again, if you go further in the history, land never belonged to the people of Ukraine because the notion of property actually makes provision for the disposal of this property of land in this case, but this was never the case because it was something which belonged to the state. And the state and the population, people is different, That's why when we are talking today about the reform, we are talking, first of all, about the implementation of the rights of not 7 now million, but 6 and something million, who are entitled to do that for the implementation of their own rights. Since this round table actually deals with the access to finance or funding, I would like to talk about theory, first of all. What our business today mentioned, and in due time I helped them with their research. You are talking about the naked theory. Potentially we have 28 plus arable lands, hectares arable lands, plus minus $1,000 per farewell, I'm talking about, per hectare of land. If we multiply that from the point of view of the possible liquid assets, we get to $28 billion of potential liquidity, or so-called this fresh collateral assets for the banking system. Maybe Taras aptly said that the agrarian business is suspending some kind of, So the banking system, after a certain cleaning on the part of the National Bank, so we are in suspended position today, in the cul-de-sac. We need some impetus in those assets and that amount of the assets which potentially can appear. This is the impetus which can actually take the system out of that dead end and actually attract the Western investments. This is the theory. Now I would like to switch to the practical aspects. We are talking about SME, and I'm not talking about the middle business because middle has vision more or less, the Ukrainian people, they can cope with all the problems when everything is bad, So the medium business, and my colleague from Raiffeisen Bank will support me in that. But if we're talking about financing the small business and what the realistically are going to have if we switch on the market without any preparation, and given the preparedness and the status of the banking system today. Point one. If we are talking about the ownership of the shares or some kind of the plots of lands which are divided today, they already lease out to the population here. So this land work somehow, and the owners who live in the city and they do not do anything about their plots of land, they just kind of idling situations, this land. They do not know what to do with those plots of land. But today, actually, we opened the private property and said, okay, the banking system can take it as a collateral. So what we are going to have. I do not claim to be too much objective, but I have the feeling that very quickly we are going to go to pawn shops of the United States of 1920s, when the certain mass of the ownership of the plots of land would come to the bank and said, we need to have a lease, a loan for this land, and they're not going to buy it out later. This is a unilateral effort. So my question is, you were talking about today's situation with the banking system, and even if we take into consideration some of its development, will it be capable of devouring or buying out of all those plots of land? I'm not sure about that. This notion that they should share, maybe our lawyers will tell me how much shares in fact we have in different fields. I think this is a lower amount which is virtually divided territory into shares. This is a certain plot of land within the boundary of the former collective farm, which is not actually tied to some specific point or site. How this facility can be considered to be a collateral and issue some money for that. To which extent this would be of interest to the potential investors?
I'm not talking about large investors who are looking at 150 hectares or more. I'm talking about small investors. Till everything is turned into in-kind, then we cannot move forward. But there is third thing. Unlike apartments, cars, and other real estate, which is clear, and in fact it is not productive, the land is a productive asset, which, especially in Ukraine, has economies of scale when there's more of that, and that is a lengthy process. And, for example, there is an owner. If there are 4 hectares, and 4 hectares are inside a big field, how interesting it is for the bank to give a loan with the collateral, taking as a collateral these 4 hectares to which you cannot reach. I believe that the whole sector of small owners will be missed by the banks, because till this becomes a really liquid asset, the banks will not agree to that. So in the result, we need to prepare the system of institutional microcrediting, which will be ready to work with small volumes and will have the network coverage. Because otherwise, from the fact that all these owners will get these small plots of land, they will not be able to use that as collateral. There's one more thing. When we are talking, saying why the sector of small business is not funded by anyone, and we are saying, and what's happening in the West, what's happening in the Western countries, they don't understand our huge agro holdings. They operate on small volumes. There's a question of infrastructure. When you have an apartment, you have electricity, you have sewage and everything. When you are in the fields, then there's no infrastructure there. In Europe, it has been created for centuries. There, people can work with small volumes. But here, it is impossible to work with small volumes. The investor has to invest into infrastructure. But that cannot be compared to what investor wants to work with. So people start working only with the volume at a scale where it's feasible to invest. And because I'm ex-advisor to the minister, I can criticize what the minister is doing, an attempt to promote some proxy. Like, we will not cancel moratorium. Let's turn this long-term lease into some institutional asset. But basically, we have it in the land code 12 plus years. Were there many agreements like that signed in Ukraine? Not many. But the market is smart. If that were an efficient alternative instrument to the private direct land market, it would have been done in at large scale, but the market is not doing it. That also shows how ready the owner of land is to sell land. The holding comes to farmers and they say, I want from everyone. I'm not interested in small scale, I'm interested in large scale. Okay, 10 title owners say, okay, we agree, and the rest say we don't. And even if we do something, this will not give us anything at the scale of the country. It will not even give us a fair value.
Более того, эмфитевсис в принципе создавался в римском.
It was created in Roman law as the way to develop non-developed lands by African colonies. It wasn't created as an element of work with active lands.
Предполагает собой, что земля будет все.
According to it, the land who will be checking whether the land is improved during the next 50 years of the operation, and what will be the degree of corruption. There's no sense in that.
Поэтому нам, подытоживая, нам на сегодняшний...
And that is why moratorium should be cancelled. But we need to prepare, besides all the legislative issues, we need to prepare the banking system, microcrediting, providing subsidies by the state or by some bodies of the interest rates, because with the banking interest rates that exist now, the small business will not cope with that. And until we do that, this sudden opening will be drastic. And today there's a big time gap.
also for your support. We have to translate this in the political context in order to win this public policy debate. That's very important. I would like to outline, the safety, the clarity of the property rights allows every individual to invest his money, his time, his lifetime energy into some specific project like an apartment or like a small farm. And this is the power of many, which is really releasing the economic potential. And this is how we built the European economic miracle, and it's very successful, and it's really what also I think Ukraine should follow very much. And the good thing is with the notaries and with the geodets and also with the property evaluators, we have all the professionals on European standards in place in order to secure the market and the people of the property rights on European standards. I'm now very happy to see the president of the property evaluators, of a member of Tegova here, Mr. Frolov. I'm happy about your contribution, and please present your expertise and your profession. The floor is yours.
Speaking about the assessment of the self-regulating organization, which was given by our regulator, the State Property Fund, in October this year, we actually, by the way, we were the first in Ukraine. We actually become part of the European group of the Assessment Association, Tegova, which you mentioned before, Günther. And I must add that this organization is in its essence the quasi-regulator of the assessment activity in the European Union, because there are a lot of directives of the European Union which actually touch upon different questions regarding the assessment issues to the global organizations. There are regulatory documents. We can actually even find those documents in English language. I'm talking about the Central Bank of the European Union documents, which actually say that this specific. They say that if there are some discrepancies, that the Tegova standards have prevalence, and we can see the integration of the European standards and European regulations approaches and to the evaluation and assessment, and the relationship between the colleagues, between the colleagues in the market, which, by the way, are very indicative and interesting for us, because they really they demonstrate the real European and fair, just level. Speaking about fair value, I can actually add to what has been said already. We were talking about the issues which will be raised before the open market in Ukraine will be provided. A very interesting aspect is that today the legislative regulation of the assessment activities is such a status then to evaluate and assess the plots of land not only for plowing or general speaking. Not the assessor or the evaluator has the right to do that. Speaking about the private and public organizations, we do not have a lot of time to speak about detail about the essence of this discrepancy collision. In 2004, the State Agency of the Land Resources, it was the name of that agency in those days, they actually set themselves the objective to assess the lands. They lobbied the necessary law, they issued necessary licenses, and about 1.5 years ago, to reduce the scope with licensing activities, and which we report to the European and the global agencies, the land licenses was cancelled by the respective legislative acts. But those amendments which were introduced in order to cancel these licensing activities for some unknown reasons were outlined in such a way that nobody can fulfill those. The Register of Natural Persons must add the legal entity, which is impossible in effect. And today we face the issue which can be resolved, or which is being resolved. I would put it this way, within the framework of all different agreements. There are different approaches. They take different ways of resolving this issue, but we cannot see the clear picture because all the regulators we have today, including the state property fund, within the boundaries of our general combating corruption, they forgot about the constructive and business components of that. If you're talking about which is very fashionable, is to blame our regulator, the state property fund. I'm opponent to that fund today, and there are a lot of different issues for which I criticize that fund. But I must admit that privatization takes place not because the separate property fund does not prepare it in a proper way, but because there is some corruptive opportunity. This was ruined. I mean, by the way, they changed the procedure of selection of the assessors or evaluators, under which we cannot introduce our own assessor. There are a lot of different variables, evaluators here. And there are a lot of variables here in the appearance of the tender. One additional evaluator will change all the calculations and forecasts, and in most cases the winner of the evaluation contest does not bear any responsibility or liability, neither before the officials or the potential buyer. And I can confirm that the participant of the market is one of the leaders in this direction. It's really good that the corruption component was actually ruined during privatization, but it was not replaced by anything. We have to take such changes into consideration. That's why the privatization has been slowed down. If we're talking about the land market, the evaluation market is not ready for that, neither physically nor legally. And I agree with Oleksii 100% that if we open that market today, it will not work, because 90% or something like that of all the transactions with the property or new rights today, those transactions carried out today based on the evaluation or assessment. And any legal questionable component may become the basis for the cancellation of the agreement, and we have such examples already in the market. The problem is that nobody, if we're talking about the regulators, they never raise this issue. Today, this issue doesn't have any possible way of resolution or solution. And if actually we had today open market of land sales, it would not work, because nobody could come up with evaluation or assessment of those lands, and no transaction of sale and purchase transactions can be implemented without that. I'm not talking even about taxation of such agreements or contracts, which again are based on the evaluation per se. So I actually touched upon the issues which will additionally bring some more problems, such problem as valuation, from the point of view of the generation of monetary flows, because under different evaluation, it fluctuates between $5 million per year for the whole country, which is not enough, including the banks, taxation, different contracts, privatization, and the lease of the public-owned communal property. But this is an indicator, index of the attitude of this or another team within this or another institution, ministry or department, towards the evaluators themselves, because the evaluation or assessment is the basis for concluding different agreements. We can make a conclusion based on the, let's say, the relations with the evaluators and how we establish relations with the evaluators. We can assume regarding the level of the market nature of different agreements taken by different departments. If we are talking about the banking system here, I must say that the National Bank of Ukraine for the last 12 or 18 months is really optimally open for the market of evaluation. It works with independent evaluators. I'm not talking about my organization, but all the organizations present on the market. They actually order evaluations regarding the capitalization or pre-capitalization, and we have to talk about the fair value on the transactions, on the operations available today, and all those issues have been covered rather well in the mass media, and I cannot give evaluation of this department generally speaking, but in the part which pertains to the evaluation, this is rather open, which I cannot say about all the departments, all the agencies which are associated today, directly or indirectly, to the regulation of the market, evaluation market. But such changes of the National Bank of Ukraine, we can say those, and this sends us the message that the positive changes towards the market nature of actions and transactions, those changes we can see today, and the market evaluation can see them readily.
The right method. When there are issues, for example, in the capacity of property evaluation or in other stakeholders, or the question of institutional capacity, then we have to address them. And we have 28 member countries in the European Union. You are a member of TEGOVA, which is an important European federation, a member of the European Chamber of Notaries, member of the Federation of Europe of Surveyors. We have to bring the capacities to this country in order to work according to the best practices in the Slovak Republic, in Croatia. All of these issues were the same everywhere, and we have solved it in various aspects, maybe differently, but there are certainly examples to bring to this beautiful country and to effectively allow a land market based on European regulation and with all the public policy issues taken care of, which need to be taken care of and handled with due care. Thanks a lot for this, Mr. Frolov. I would like now to open some questions or debate, if some contributions from the other panelists maybe to the debate. Or some questions maybe from the audience, please. Lawyers, obviously very important in the property sector. Please.
I don't understand Ukrainian. I didn't understand everything. I understand that you did a deep analysis of the market, and you? What is foreigner for you? The foreigner could be a legal entity, a physical person who's non-resident of Ukraine. That is the problem. For example, what do you do? The foreigners work on the territory of Ukraine via Ukrainian legal entities, but for example, the Ukrainians are trying to sell their shares to someone who's managing that. There is such a situation once we're talking about the lease market or another market. Our analysis shows that the market should be open. There should be no prohibition to this sale or purchase for foreigners. Moratorium does not really, is not about these things that we are talking about. The canceling moratorium will lead to the transparency of market, and the relations will be legal, and the market will be open. Foreigners will be able to buy land, just like domestic investors who operate on this market. They will have the right to buy it, and this way we will stimulate the demand for land as the resource, and we will be developing our economy, our business. We will attracting foreign investments to technologies like precision or smart farming, or building new silos, and that is something that requires additional investments, not just into land.
Then from the notary to answer your question.
I would add, I will tell you in Russian so that you understand it, to check the founder of the company which is buying the land is easy. Notaries know how to do it, and they are doing it. They're checking there's the register of legal entities, and you see in this register who's the final beneficiary. And that's very important because the land code provides for what you are talking about. It is possible to check it, and it is checked. But how profitable it is. But if you allow one more question, I take, taking the experience of our German farmers who work here, they were discussing the issue of canceling moratorium. Who was for canceling moratorium? And only one farmer raised hand. Others were saying, where you paid some money. The farmers who work here, they already have the market of lease of land. It's operating, and for the farmer, it's not so important whether he has the right of ownership or whether he leases the land. And they ask, if the moratorium is cancelled, then they will have the priority right to purchase the land, and they will think then whether they should buy land or not, if they are allowed. And they don't want to invest this money into land. They want to invest it into new equipment, fertilizers. If we think that this will attract new investments, I doubt that. And they will rechannel their money for some other things. Maybe they were planning to buy a new tractor. Instead of that, they will buy land. And the agricultural sector will not get monetized because people invest money into land but not into equipment. What's your opinion? Taras mentioned the risks, and if the land is in ownership, then this is not so big risk and more chances to get a loan from a financial institution. But it's about ownership of by the population who cannot dispose of it. And another thing is business who has the right to lease it. But when moratorium is cancelled, they will be able to buy it. Maybe after you talk to farmers, to German community, you probably understood that it's not profitable for them now, but in time the free market will make relations transparent, will make the market free, and will help the development of the real sector. Tell me another question to you. German farmers with who you were talking to, which money they're using, their German money, right? What are the rates in Germany, in Europe, to finance the farmers who work abroad, but who are Germans? 3%, yeah, plus minus. If they work at home, some security insurance margin is added, but it's still not 15, 17, 20% that we are talking about here. So German farmers don't have a desire to leave the lease situation and to start buying, and that's normal because they're using very cheap money compared to local market. The companies that are here locally don't have access to such money. They have access only to the rates that exist here. And just from the mathematical point of view, the reduction of risk on the interest rate when they switch from leasehold to other. So I understand the position of existing small foreign investors here. After the market is open, they can continue lease land. Those who give them land for lease probably also want to have this land in their ownership, but not to give the right to those who want to sell it would be wrong, because others want to get the money that German farmers are using. I will add, from a financial institution, we'll look at that from the point of view of real business. It's not a prawn shop crediting. Once we're talking about real crediting, we're interested in continuous operational process. It doesn't matter if this is the lease for 50 years or ownership. For our clients, it's not about rates so much, but the affordability of the financing, what they can give as collateral to prove that their business process is continuous. And the right to own this asset and its long-term lease or ownership. If they cannot show such rights, they will not get any financing, irrespective of what the rates will be. As to the rates, today the small business can get at 16.5% annual in hryvnia. And that's quite low interest, and we believe that the rates will go down if the National Bank copes with the inflation.
Economic stabilization of Ukraine, and congratulations to this major achievement. Now it's important to go to the sector markets, and it's important, this combination between land and the banking sector, how it can be achieved. If there are specific issues, for example, in property evaluation, work with the Association of Property Evaluators and with the central bank as the supervising authority and start a dialogue. If there are specific problems in the cadastre with like unclarity in property ownership and in lines and in borders, there is the Geodesy, yeah, and build this profession successfully with the profession representing them, and also with the cadastre agency, with the land register. And if there are property rights issues, then build it with the court system and also with the Chamber of Notary, because these are the stakeholders and these are the profession you need to strengthen. And if this dialogue is successfully, also together with the banking system and with the central bank again as the key stakeholder, gradually, over a really overseeable period of time, suddenly the SME rates from 16 will significantly decrease. And this is the magic of the mortgage market, as I call it like this. Yeah? It works very much. Yeah? And if there's regulatory issues which need to be handled, and there's Alexander from the Prime Minister's office, and in the European Union we have successfully solved all the public policy and challenges concerning land already. And there is a reason why the interest rates are so low, because the security of land ownership is so strong. Yeah? I can be sure that my land is my land. I can be sure my apartment is my apartment. I can bring it to Raiffeisen Bank in Vienna, and I can take the money out, or I can also invest in new things. And this safety, this is very solid. And it builds a very strong economy, and this is what we want for Ukraine as well. Please. And in Germany it's as well like that.
A short comment. You were talking about the risk as well. I believe in the country where there are some questions regarding the rule of law, if those questions remain, then it doesn't matter. I'm the owner and the leaser, and the risks are the same. There is no right to lease, there is no right to property. If we could resolve those problems, there will be the rule of law, then I don't see any problems faced by the bank. This is kind of artificial discussion. You know that in our countries, in Austria or Germany, the farmers, in most cases, they lease out the land. This is no problem. They live happily and easily with that, you know. So I believe the key issue to be not whether we are talking about the ownership rights. The real problem lies in something different. For example, if you had the rule of law in this country, then we would not discuss those issues today with you, no?
Law in the country, we have very strong notary, and if there are issues, we definitely will be addressing them together in the framework of European regulation. That's the plan we have, and we are grateful to have the Chamber of Notary, which is very strongly embedded in the European Chamber of Notary, has also technical assistance in that field, and you know that will be gradually. You know, I'm sure it's not overnight, but the reliability of all the data, together with this modern e-government capabilities, which you already have in many areas, like in Protsenko, you have done it in procurement. I'm sure also there's a lot of transparency in your cadastre already. Maybe it can be still improved, but seeing the significant effect, which in just 5 years in Macedonia, in Albania, in Serbia, it was possible by a cooperation of the central bank and the property evaluators, of the ministries, of the institutions governing land and money in a country. If this is significantly working together with the notary, then things are looking much better for SMEs very, very fast. And this is my optimistic, okay, please, of course, you're an important stakeholder from the Federation of Tourism, and this is important for SMEs, definitely. Please, Tatiana.
Thank you. We already held several functions with the initiative regarding the SME development in tourist business. I would like to draw attention to the following aspect as preservation of the historical cultural heritage, which is part of development of tourism in any country of the world. I would like to draw attention to the situation with the register of the cultural and historical facilities in Ukraine in regard to this kind of PPP or implementation of PP in this specific aspect. Because we encountered, you know, we have our initiatives of our federation together with the public organizations and the associations to introduce or to take care of the PP contracts or agreements, public-private partnership, in order to preserve the historical and cultural facilities in Ukraine. And the first problem we came across is the confirmation of the title of ownership, or the right of ownership to those buildings or facilities. So this ground table and discussion is not the resolution of the problems, but maybe we have to enter a special item regarding the inventory of such buildings and facilities, and really to prepare such construction sites or building facilities in order to become part of the PPP agreements.
And to have clarity in the usage and in the long-term planning, what is for infrastructure, what is for residential purposes, what is for tourism, what is for natural protection, what is also for industrial use, what is for many other aspects which are really important for land, for agriculture, for example, and to have this clarity and the transparency of it in the state geoportal, and to really have this access makes it very easy to invest and makes it very clear and secure. And certainly this is the way forward for Ukraine. There's a lot of initiatives on that one, and you know, we have to call also, now we had the SME sector representative, the think tanks, the banks, the financial sector. We also need the insurance on board. We have the professional service providers now on board, and in the next step is also to have the land management state agency, the Cadastre and the central bank on board, and together with them to lead this debate very successfully and bring modern European levels of land management to Ukraine, and it will be enormously successful for the whole society and bring European levels of growth and transparency, which is our aim. I would like to close it now, and I would like to thank all the speakers, and I would like to call that all the stakeholders work very closely with Alexander when it comes to public policy regulatory issues, and then also to very closely work together between the property sector service provider, especially the evaluators, especially the surveyors, especially the notaries, to call you to sign MOUs between your professions in order to really work very closely, structurally together, as well with the banking sector, and bring standards gradually upwards. And my thank you for EasyBusiness to lead this debate and allow us, together with the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, to conduct the fifth roundtable about key aspects of how to bring European SME policy to Ukraine. This has really been very successful in Central Europe. This has been very successful in Southeastern Europe and will be very successful also in Ukraine. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to a very successful year 2017 together.